The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Wowzers, if you were a kid in the early 90s, you no doubt were a fan of this show. After all, what's not to love? It's a story about a group of teenagers being given superpowers by a mystical being called Zordon, who is basically a giant head in a tube, who is aided by his robot sidekick / comedic foil Alpha 5. Where the teenagers now have the ability to turn into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, as they fight evil monsters sent to Earth by the evil Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed, where the Rangers can summon robotic dinosaurs known as Zords, which all combine together to make the ultimate fighting machine, the Megazord, where the Megazord goes on to fight giant monsters in the city.
I mean, damn, just what was there not to love about this show? So naturally, today we are going to look into 10 things that you may not know or may have forgotten about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The show that was so campy and cheesy, but at the same time it was just so damn enjoyable. Let's do this.
Number 10. Super Sentai. Indeed, Power Rangers is based on a Japanese action-packed superhero TV show called Super Sentai. Oh, and I don't mean it's a remake of the show, I mean Power Rangers actually used footage from Super Sentai, especially scenes where we would see our heroes in their Power Rangers costumes, along with the Zords and battles and moments with the show's villains. It was 1993 when Saban Entertainment bought the rights to use the footage from Super Sentai for their Fox Kids show, Power Rangers. Power Rangers recycled the footage from the show's 16th season to be precise. That's why some scenes from the show look as though they were filmed in California or America, but when an action sequence takes place with our heroes in costume, the background looks darker and grainier, with some background scenery clearly showing Japan. Just like Power Rangers, Super Sentai has a long and glorious history, having started in 1975 and still going on to this day. And when Saban used up all the Power Ranger footage from Super Sentai, the Super Sentai film crew filmed more footage purely for the Power Rangers. Number 9. Original titles and names. When the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was in its development stages, it actually had a different name. It went under the name of Dino Rangers, which I guess makes sense as many of the Zords were based off dinosaurs, and this was coming off the hype of Jurassic Park. Speaking of Zords, they weren't originally called Zords, but in fact droids, which once again does kind of make sense as they were android robots. Wow, what was Zordon thinking when he decided to call them Zords? Or is that Zoltar? Yeah, originally Zordon, the ever-powerful mighty being who gives the Power Rangers their abilities, was going to be called Zoltar. But I'm really glad that name was changed because I think Zoltar and I think Peter O'Toole's character from Supergirl.
Yeah, look, you know you're setting yourself up for failure when you start naming your characters after characters from the 1984 Supergirl movie.
Number 8. Pilot. So most fans would know about the first episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and how it starts with villain Rita Repulsa being freed, and then our emotionally unstable teenagers becoming the awesome that is the Power Rangers. Well, before this episode was aired, there was actually a pilot episode which was put together, which actually used different footage to that of the first actual episode. And just like most pilots, there were several changes, namely Billy's hair. But it was the basic plot of the first episode, with all our favourite characters, including Jason, Kimberly, Zach, Trini, Wait a minute! That's not Trini!
What? Imposter!
Indeed, in the original pilot, actress Audrey DuBois portrayed Trini the Yellow Ranger. But when it came time to actually start filming the actual series, she wanted more money to star in the show, where she was then replaced by Thuy Trang. Although DuBois regrets asking for more money and thus not getting her time to shine in Power Rangers, if it wasn't for this mishap, we wouldn't have got the awesome that is Thuy Trang as Trini the Yellow Ranger.
Rest in peace, Thuy Trang. She had a wonderful screen presence.
Number 7. The Yellow Ranger was originally played by a male actor.
Yeah, some more strange and dubious information surrounding the Yellow Ranger. As if the whole cast swap thing wasn't complicated enough, in the original Super Sentai footage that was recycled for Power Rangers,
The Yellow Ranger was in fact a male character.
this is because the character of the Yellow Ranger from the Super Sentai footage was in fact a male character.
In addition to that, Walter Emmanuel Jones, who played Zack, lost one of his index fingers in an accident when he was just 4 years old. But due to clever filming, you can never tell this when watching the show, and it's only something that I found out in past tense. And if things couldn't get any more trivial, let's not forget the time when the Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles had a crossover, probably making it the most 90s combo ever. And that wasn't their only crossover, as in 2017 the Power Rangers would enter the DC universe and team up with the Justice League. For a series of special graphic novels, of course. And on this very day, while I'm re-editing this episode, I just found out that there's going to be a crossover comic book with the Power Rangers and A Nightmare on Elm Street, which, I must say, really intrigues me.
Number 6. Comic book. So in 1995, during the hype of the Power Rangers craze, the show actually made its leaps and bounds onto the printed page in its very own comic book series. And this wasn't published by Marvel or DC, but it was in fact by Zordon Entertainment itself. And it was fun watching the Power Rangers go on further adventures that we never actually got to see them go on in the TV show.
Not to mention the fact that the comic book series was beautifully drawn, and got all the characters' likenesses and personalities down to a T. However, one strange thing that I always found was weird is that their Power Coin logos were always on their chests.
Yeah, for some reason, most of the Power Rangers advertisement and promotional material featured giant logos on the Rangers' chests, like as if they were superheroes. I've heard all sorts of theories as to why this was done. From it being a way to tell the Power Rangers apart, which makes no sense, as that's why each Ranger had their own colour, to other theories claiming that it was due to copyright issues, as changes had to be made to the costumes and the promotional material. Which actually makes more sense, I guess. However, back to the comics. Once the movie came out, Marvel Comics did release a comic book adaptation of the movie, along with a series called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Ninja Rangers. Number 5. Video game craze. So as mentioned, Power Rangers was huge in the 90s. It was to little kids in the 90s what the Beatles were to teenagers in the 60s. And oh boy, did the onslaught of video games come a-flocking in with this one. Take your pick, as there were many video games based off the hit show. A video game for Power Rangers was released on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Sega CD. And they were leaving no stone unturned for this one. They were going to get Power Rangers out there any way they could. And then the movie came along, which once again means more games, as once again a version of this game was released on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear. But this time, no Sega CD. I guess at this stage, Sega CD wasn't cool enough anymore? But if that insane bombardment of Power Ranger games wasn't enough, also that very year in 1995, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Fighting Edition came out on the Super Nintendo. Along with the following year, Power Rangers Zeo Battle Racers on the Super Nintendo and Power Rangers Zeo Full Tilt Battle Pinball on the Sony PlayStation.
Although after that, there wasn't another Power Rangers game till the year 2000, as the Power Rangers craze kind of fizzled out by 1996. However, during the mid-90s, there was no escaping the Power Rangers video game invasion.
Number 4. Action figures.
Oh hell yeah, these figures were awesome. In fact, it was these toys that got me into the show in the first place. The Power Ranger action figures were big, had good articulation, and looked just like their TV show counterparts, and also generally looked badass. Okay, there were actually plenty of other toys released to celebrate / capitalize on the Power Rangers, but it's these figurines that stand out to me, as they were just pure plastic awesomeness.
Of course, the Zords were also included in the lineup, and looking back at it, it's a shame that the Zords weren't that much bigger than the Rangers themselves,
But hey, that didn't matter as they were still awesome, and I loved putting the Zords together to make Megazord. The only thing that bothered me about these toys is once again the giant logos on their chests. That is the one thing that bothered me on the account that the logos weren't present in the actual show. Number 3, the location of the movie. So considering that the TV show was made up of footage filmed in California and Japan, there was only one logical place for the movie to be filmed: Australia.
Wait, what?
Sydney, Australia to be precise, with the Australian city doubling for Angel Grove. In fact, some of the episodes for the next seasons of Power Rangers were filmed in the Sydney location too. Although Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie isn't fondly remembered, it was actually a huge chapter of the movie industry in Australia, as to my knowledge this was the first big blockbuster franchise movie to be filmed in the land down under. And although the movie flopped, it obviously left an impression in the industry, with many studios realising that Australia, or at least Sydney, is a cost-effective place to film and has a distinct metropolitan beauty about it. So not too long after the Power Rangers movie, the Matrix trilogy was then filmed in Sydney, and since then it's actually a very common practice for Hollywood movies to be filmed in this country. And that's kind of thanks to the Power Rangers movie, as over the years there have been all kinds of films shot in Australia, from Star Wars to Pirates of the Caribbean. Number 2, Zordon was only filmed but once. Actor David Fielding is one of the most recognisable faces associated with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, having taken on the role of Zordon, and his powerful presence would be a huge part of the show for many years, and his tenure of the show outlasts many of the Power Rangers actors who starred in the long-running series. However, despite the fact that Zordon is one of the most longest running characters in the show, his part was the shortest and easiest to film, as apparently one afternoon, Fielding went into the studio to film his Zordon scenes, and all they did was film some close-ups of his face pulling certain expressions, and that was it. And that one little bit of filming done in 1993 became the powerful face of Zordon, which would be reused over and over again throughout the series.
Personally, I always wondered why Zordon only had a couple of expressions, and why they all looked the same. Even when he was talking, I would often notice that his face was sort of like doing this. I don't know, am I the only one who noticed that?
Number 1, casting swap. Just before the movie went into production, there was a huge casting change in the Power Rangers TV show, as Austin St. John, Walter Emmanuel Jones,
and Thuy Trang, who played the Red Ranger, Black Ranger, and Yellow Ranger,
were replaced with new actors, with Steve Cardenas as the Red Ranger, Johnny Young Bosch as the Black Ranger, and Karen Ashley as the Yellow Ranger. Personally, I didn't really like the cast change. I felt like their personalities were nowhere near as strong as the original Red, Black and Yellow Rangers. I mean, heck, before Tommy came along and stole the show, Austin St. John was the show's main lead, and the show itself portrayed his character Jason as the leader of the Power Rangers. Whereas the new Red Ranger, Rocky, was just sort of there and didn't really have the command or power of St. John's Jason. The change was apparently made because St. John, Jones and Trang asked for more money, especially with a movie in the works, so they were quickly replaced just before the movie went into production. There is another claim that the original 3 actors left the show because they found the show's hefty scheduling to be too much. We may never know the full truth. But I felt like the new cast were just there to fill in the gaps, and just didn't have the personalities of their predecessors. Amy Jo Johnson, who played Kimberly the Pink Ranger, left not too long after, and supposedly her replacement, Catherine Sutherland, turned up to the set of the Power Rangers movie expecting to play the Pink Ranger. I'm guessing till she embarrassingly saw that Johnson was on set playing the part. However, the saddest story of a cast member leaving the show surrounds David Yost, who played Billy the Blue Ranger,
who in recent years has explained that he left the show due to bullying that was taking place behind the scenes.
And hearing him tell his story of what happened is very sad. However, it's nice to see that he still celebrates his character and the show, and despite what happened, still, like the rest of the fans, has a love for it.
Power Rangers will always and forevermore have a special place in my heart. There is something so magical about watching it as a kid in the 90s, as at that time I had never seen anything quite like it. It really expanded my imagination. and I think it's the first live-action media to ever get my adrenaline fully pumped. Anyway, I'm Minty, and it's morphin' time!